Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Hypertrophy Over Coffee podcast. I hope you're doing well. We are joined by Mr. James, ex-bodybuilder in brackets, Walsham. How are we doing, young sir?
I'm doing very, very well. Very glad to be here. I haven't talked to anyone on a podcast in like way too long.
Now you have.
It's yeah, thank God. I've been dying over here.
Oh,
Like New
speaking on
Zealand.
that. Speaking on that, what's happened to when's the return of the podcast? When's the return of the
That's a
Hypertrophy
good
Hub?
question.
Maybe we'll
Uh,
get into that
I would
first.
say probably early next year, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I'm finishing my thesis right now and coaching. I'm at the point now where I don't have like 57 clients, but like I have more clients than I can currently comfortably deal with.
Yeah.
So, and I'm grateful to be in that position. And the reason I did the podcast was to get clients.
Yeah.
And obviously, I like doing the podcast because I get to talk to smart people and like banter with the bros.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just doesn't make sense for me at the moment.
Sure.
Because I'm not even taking my own business that seriously.
Mm.
But I would like to continue learning from other scientists, like getting people on from different fields.
Yep.
Like I feel like I've had a lot of the bodybuilding folk on, and that's been very, very rewarding. But now, as my interest in bodybuilding kind of decreases a little bit and moves more towards like general physique improvement for the average person,
Mm-hmm.
or like diabetes, obesity, things like that, then yeah, I'd love to get more general public health people on because I think the issues there are just so massive, and they're very, very hard to combat, I think.
Yeah. Well, they can be combated by personal trainers, right?
Mm,
Which is going to
I
be
hope
our
so.
exact topic for today. So we actually got Mr. James on. I'm going to call you Mr. James now. On the podcast to go
Fantastic.
through his. You basically touched on it a little bit. Your kind of, I think you said about your thesis or kind of your study right now. I'm not too sure if you've actually finished that or you're going through it now.
So currently, the process we're in is well, I'm conducting a study with Dr. Eric Helms, Dr. Ivan, or soon to be Dr. Ivan Jukic, and Rosie Hunter. So they're my colleagues in Auckland at AUT. Basically, we're conducting a scoping review at the moment. We're trying to figure out if there's any research on personal trainers helping people lose weight, which is really weird, right? Like you would think, like for instance, in New Zealand, there's 5,000 personal trainers, and there doesn't seem to be, at least from my preliminary search before I did the search, and now we're like 4 months deep in screening papers, and that's not like very fun, but it's got to get done. And it doesn't actually seem like there's any research or there doesn't seem like there's much at all on personal trainers helping people lose weight,
Right.
which to me is mind blowing, right? Because what do most personal trainers advertise? They advertise, hey, come to my 12-week shredding course or my 12-week shredding boot camp or whatever it is.
Yeah. Santa
Um,
Shred.
yeah, Santa's shred with Santa or whatever. And like, I think that is kind of crazy, right? We have all these personal trainers and we don't know if they're effective. And I think it's probably quite likely that some of them are doing more harm than good. But I don't want to discount um, the progress that I think the personal training industry is making.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I do think a lot of personal trainers, like obviously a lot of people you and I know, are amazing. It's like some of them are so knowledgeable that I can't even comprehend. But then I think there's a lot of personal trainers where they can do the certification. I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but in New Zealand, you can do a certification in like 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah. So yeah, you can get ones that are like that. So you can. There's a very low kind of bar to kind of enter the industry. You can
Mm-hmm.
go through ones like the PD Collective, Personal Training
Oh,
Collective,
yeah.
which I think it used to be Shredded by Science, right? But that
Yeah.
seems a good route for like personal trainers to kind of go into. But yeah, like if you just typed in personal trainer certification online, then I'm
Yeah.
sure you're going to get some basic bitch shit. So
Yeah. And those simply don't prepare people. Like they don't get people ready to do what they need to do because personal training is in a really weird space because you're not a clinical practitioner, but are you a health practitioner? I would argue yes. And I think like personal trainers need to be given more opportunity and more education because we don't get given like I've done a bachelor's degree in health science, graduate diploma in sports science, and then an honors degree in sports science. And like most personal trainers can't do that. Like it's just they pick personal training, they're like, cool, I want to be a personal trainer. And then they do the certification and that's meant to prepare them. And then there's more like another problem where it's like, okay, they finish the cert, they're training people and they think, okay, cool, I know I'm not good enough. And then they think, where do I go for further education? So they're kind of in a really hard position. I don't blame the personal trainers at all. Like there's probably some that I think are probably negligent or are just thinking, cool, I can make money if I keep clients coming back, then they'll keep paying me their $80 for a 45-minute session or whatever it is. But I think it's a really hard position that personal trainers are in.
Yeah. So why do you number one, why do you think that there is like literally no research in that area? And also, why do you think so? I'm trying to think like where would you class like personal trainers in? Like you've got obviously like the dietitian side of things who are prescribed to kind of get people to lose weight. Where would you like categorize the kind of personal trainer like now? I suppose that's probably two really big questions, but
it's a really important question, I think. Like, well, firstly, like, why is there no research on personal trainers? I think it's because they're non-clinical.
right.
Like, even when conducting my scoping review, people can look at my eligibility criteria for the studies that I'm including online. And in it, like, I'm excluding people with chronic conditions because I don't think personal trainers are qualified to do that. It doesn't really make sense. Like, yes, maybe something like someone has they're pre-diabetic. Does that count? What about hypertension? They're 50 years old. A lot of people who are 50 years old have hypertension. So it's like we're drawing a hard line. But even so, I'm not finding anything with chronic conditions or without. It's very few and far between. Like there's a great researcher out of Australia who's done a lot of research kind of looking at nutritionists and personal trainers and just generally practitioners in the industry. And they've done some really, really good research, but it's very hard. There's no trials that I've seen that have been like, we've got 20 personal trainers and we've got them to train X amount of people for 12 weeks, completely individualized, doing it all their own. They're not doing the program that we tell them to do. They're just doing what they normally do with clients. There's no studies where they're actually trying to measure how effective personal trainers are. But then there is studies for registered dietitians. I haven't seen any for nutritionists, but I haven't looked that hard for nutritionists.
Right.
So it's like, it's perplexing to me, but I think it's because they're non-clinical.
Okay.
So they don't really fit that mold. Like if you're a dietitian, you're qualified to help diabetics. You're qualified to help people with obesity. But then yes, it's really up in the air of where a personal trainer falls there.
Yeah.
What was the second question?
I was just saying, where do you think they kind of fall? So, well, like, where would you put them in the bracket of, like, say, like dietitian, nutritionist? Like, where do you reckon they would kind of be in that bracket? Would you say it's like I suppose it would be obviously in the training aspect as well. Like, you've obviously got that side of things, which could be like, I think what that the equivalent would be to like a dietitian, but for training.
Yeah, I think like, because for instance, we have personal trainers, nutritionists, dietitians, exercise physiologists, and like the average person does not need to go to an exercise physiologist.
No.
But then a lot of people look at personal trainers and they think like, what does this person really do? Aren't they just like selling me stuff and maybe like taking me through my workout? Like I think personal trainers need more respect, but I think they need to earn that respect by being given better qualifications. But I because the thing that really gets me is like, as Catherine Barnes research, the researcher out of Australia, she's shown most fitness companies or personal trainers, they advertise, I help people lose weight. That's their advertisement. And then we know that personal trainers don't feel confident in their nutrition knowledge as well, because we've surveyed personal trainers and asked them. Well, she has, Catherine Barnes. And we know that they commonly go outside of the scope of practice, well, they might be effective. That's the thing. So then where, yeah, it's
Yeah. Do you think do you think the reason why it's the effectiveness or like the effective situation, do you think that's from a scope of not necessarily a scope of practice, maybe like knowledge standpoint, or do you think that's like an accountability standpoint, like when someone trained like turns up to X session and they do X kind of movement, do you think that they self-consciously, I'm going to put this in air quotes, like eat healthier, etc., and then that's where the kind of fat loss will come from? Or
I think personal trainers probably give, because for instance, I think personal trainers need to look at themselves somewhat like like if a client comes to you and they have health goals, like look at the emerging sort of field of being a health coach. Like health coaches, it's a really like new profession, and it's something where you say like, oh, I'm a health coach, and someone looks at you and they say, what the hell is that? But it's got a lot of different definitions. But like you might, for instance, help people with diabetes find better practitioners, or you might help individuals get healthier, which is something I'm sort of thinking about slowly transitioning to. But I really think, sorry, I just lost your question. What was your question? What did you say?
so we were talking about potentially with like why personal trainers are kind of effective. Do you reckon that's from like the kind of accountability standpoint, like the stance of it, or do you think that that's actually like a competence, as it were?
I'm just thinking. That's the thing, right? I think some are really effective, like Steve from Revive Stronger, for instance.
Nah,
I would find it very hard to like, if I looked at Steve, I would be pretty comfortable giving him some pretty random cases, and I think he'd do a pretty good job, But then, yeah, just that's the thing, right? We don't know if the average personal trainer is effective.
Yeah.
Which is because like who's funding that? Because we're not meant to deal with people with clinical conditions. So then do we only deal with general population who want to lose a little bit of body fat, but not too much?
Yeah.
Like so, it's in this really weird space.
Yeah. So when we talk about like scope of practice, we kind of don't know that then. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I think is one of the key problems, right? It's like, what is a personal trainer's scope of practice?
Yeah.
Do you give nutrition guidelines? Like we know people like yourself, you'll be like, cool, what's your sleep like? Like,
yeah,
are you sleeping with an iPad in front of your face? Like these sort of lifestyle design things matter.
Yeah.
But it's not something, I mean, those things aren't getting covered in like personal training certificates. But neither is nutrition, like, except like, here's what a carbohydrate is, here's what a protein is. So yeah, I think you're right, man. Like I do think that it's just about the scope of practice. Like for instance, in my undergrad, I was studying podiatry, and we know exactly what we can do and what we can't do. It's very clear. There's no, like, for instance, a podiatrist will trim toenails from time to time. And if you trim someone's fingernails, that is illegal. That is outside of your scope of practice. And we all know that. But as a personal trainer, can you give a meal plan? Like, can you give recommendations? It's just so up in the air that it's hard for personal trainers to know like where their scope of practice actually is, and adjusting it as a whole other standpoint. Because do you go and make it hard on the personal trainers, or do you go and make it hard on the people certifying the personal trainers? And then what happens if you make the certifications harder, and then do you have to bring all the other personal trainers up? Do they have to go and get recertified? Like it's I just think it's not really been like the policy for personal trainers just isn't really constructed well, because they don't know what they're meant to do. Like they're not a strength and conditioning coach, so they don't work with athletes, so they work with general population. But yeah, that's what I aim to figure out with my research, right? Like, are they effective? Do we have any research on that? I don't, like, we haven't finished the screening just yet. But yeah, I'm very, very excited to finish it and make a solid argument. We're hoping to publish a study. And then hopefully if I pursue my PhD, not next year, maybe the year after I've relaxed and gone to the beach a few times and stuff, then I want to make a really good case of how to fix the problem, or like an element of the problem, because it's a big problem in the PhD, because I don't see people talking about it, which to me is crazy.
No.
Like, we were thinking of topics to study, and Eric sort of mentioned something similar to this, and then I don't know, I think we talked about a few things, and then we kind of ended up here. And to me, it blows my mind that it's just not a thing that's being done, because we have like a massive workforce that's kind of being underutilized and not really respected. Like a general practitioner is never going to refer to a personal trainer and say, hey, go and see my personal trainer friend. Yeah. It's just not going to happen, which I think is a shame, because they know what they're talking about. And the ones who don't just have been undereducated because the certifications suck. Yes. So, and like, I don't think that's like controversial to say that certifications suck, because everyone knows they suck,
Yeah. I think that's a very common thing when coming up in the fitness industry, is that that they suck. I remember learning or doing mine after online, or being a kind of a coaching people for like 3 years, and kind of having to almost unlearn some of the stuff to get the curriculum to where they want it. And it's kind of like, fuck, like that's so fucking bad, because if someone's going into this not knowing anything, and then they're kind of looking at this and going, right, this is the answer, then they're fucked. But I think that's probably why, just thinking about it now, that's probably why the personal trainers have such a massive turnover. Like, I don't know what it's like over there, but over here, you're probably looking at like 6 months for a personal trainer. That's
exactly, because people aren't prepared. Like I'm doing I'm trying to get reps registered. I don't know if you guys have that in the UK. It's sort of like it's like the highest personal training sort of like registration in New Zealand. And like, I'm doing a course for that. And like, yeah, you're damn right.
I think I did right.
I do the assignments and I'm dying. Like every time I write the assignment, it's like just stuff that isn't necessary. It's not individualized, or like they don't try to make you think about that kind of stuff. It's just like, give some nutritional advice. It will stay within your scope of practice.
I remember one of the questions was about hyperplasia versus hypertrophy, and they had both of the curriculums were swapped. So they were talking about hyperplasia like hypertrophy, and hypertrophy like hyperplasia. So I had to, and I was like, okay, cool, right, okay, this is shit.
Damn, that's rough.
Yeah,
I mean, I do think that people, like, often when they talk about further education, they talk a lot about like people should understand what like mechanical tension is and things like that. But I just think, like, I don't know, I think our evidence-based community, and like I'm totally guilty of this, like I would interview like people who would just talk about physiology for like an hour and a half. But I think people focus a lot, maybe too much, on like physiology and things like that. Whereas like I was a terrible coach like 2 years ago or whenever I started. And the thing that's made the difference is actually coaching people and like communicating with people. Like, if you can get someone to trust you, even if your program's kind of shit, they'll do it. So then they're doing more than they were when they weren't with you. So
yeah, I think I think when you start becoming a proper like a really good coach, it's the difference between the physiology and the psychology, because the psychology will play such a big fucking role in everything, because like if you can't understand that, and you can't understand how to speak to people as well and have empathy and everything else like that, that's kind of what coaching and personal training really is. It's not necessarily about giving someone a meal plan and then them executing the meal plan. It's kind of like the whole psychology around that. So yeah, it's a very interesting one.
Yeah, man, I think it's absolutely spot on. Like I'm loving to see how seriously you take your coaching. It's pretty inspiring for me. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing next year at all, but we'll see. And it's cool to see like people who take coaching seriously as an actual one-to-one coach, but then the actual business stuff.
Yeah.
Bon appetit. Very beautiful.
Bone apple tea.
Yeah, just lovely stuff,
Sweet. So what if you were to wave Mr. James's magical wand, and you could kind of have everything set into place right now, how would you do that? What would you want in kind of framework, everything else like that?
I think, I mean, the certifications have to change at the end of the day, like globally, to be honest, because like there's also research by Catherine Crofts. She's just done so much in this space where she's sort of looked at personal training certifications globally and just seen like they don't match globally, which is like cool. Podiatrists aren't the same globally, but like there's quite a big disparity. So I think we need to raise the bar for personal trainers. Like look at what JPS Health and Fitness is doing. It's like their whole brand of when they're talking about education for personal trainers is raising the standard, right? I think we need to think of some way to raise the standard, but I think it's a lot easier said than done. Like I've had quite a few conversations with Eric about this, and it's sort of like if you pull one lever, something else happens that you didn't think would happen. Like the dropout rate increases, or now only rich kids like myself can get into personal training because it's a 6-month certification that costs X amount of dollars, you know? And maybe like we have StudyLink in New Zealand, maybe StudyLink doesn't cover it. So then you need to literally have whatever amount of money. Like currently they don't cover certifications in New Zealand. There might be another company that does it though, so I might just be uninformed there. But I think when we make these changes, if we can make these changes, we need to really consider the knock-on effects of everything we do, rather than just ramping up. Like if we ramp up the bar for individual personal trainers, I think that's going to leave a lot of people in a really tough position when, like, as we know, especially right now, right? Like I lost all my clients but one at the beginning of the pandemic. And I'm like an online coach. So it's not like they're all local to me. So I can't imagine everyone else has been, it's been perfect. And I think if we ratchet up the bar, so then they have to go pass a bunch of new tests, I don't know if that's the way. But that's kind of why I want to do the PhD, right? Because then I can spend 3 or 4 years figuring out if there's a solution to this problem. What have people said before? Because I'm sure someone else is talking about this. See if I can collaborate with other researchers, see if I can use the PhD to make an argument, and then use the argument to ideally make some policy arguments, which can then hopefully make some kind of changes. I would also like to try and infiltrate like New Zealand sort of exercise organizations, because I'm sure they're aware of this, but like the fact that I can start an online personal training business and not register for ages and no one knows, like I didn't really have a qualification, I don't think that's great. And like everyone can do that. And yeah, I just think that I think the solution to the problem is really, really difficult. Because if you enforce more education, I don't know about that. If we could have like a free education program where personal trainers who've been practicing for 1 year plus can go and become a nutritionist, or they can learn about health coaching or whatever through a X week course where they can have like something that makes them be able to, because I think the rules for personal trainers are in terms of nutrition, you can translate the guidelines, and I think that's it. And the guidelines aren't perfect everywhere. They're not like, they're usually pretty good. But I think we need more than that, frankly. Like advice for sure is great, but that's like, your mom can tell you advice about nutrition. My mom's always telling me to eat my vegetables and eat less protein and all these kinds of things. So we want people to have specific nutrition advice, because I think personal trainers for the most part do a pretty good job around training. Like there's obviously, like people don't understand what RPE is or something, but I don't think that's that big of a problem. As long as someone's training consistently, then the general population person, they're probably ticking the boxes. But then the nutrition is the hard part, because can they even trust their personal trainer? Do they trust them to give nutritional advice?
I think that's it's a very Yeah, it's a very grey area. It's something that I was thinking about the other day was well, I'm going to be starting to do like coaching calls where we're going to be
Mm,
basically having like consult calls with coaches, but at the same level, it's kind of like obviously I've got like a track record and whatever. I've got clients, my own business and stuff, and it's just obviously my aim is to raise the bar, but then
mm.
like is is that within my scope of practice, if that makes sense, because there is no scope of practice. like
Hmm.
it's
No,
kind
but
of like this.
I think it's pretty reasonable, man. Like you
Yeah,
obviously know your shit and you know how to talk to clients, you know how to attract clients, which
yeah.
people struggle with. And like, I think it sounds pretty reasonable. Like,
Yeah, I think a lot of me is I think when people come into personal training, I think that they look at money and not
mm,
people helping people, because I think
mm,
that's a big one. That's a big area where
mm,
people come into the fitness industry and be like especially online coaching. It's like this fucking glamorous thing, like sitting on the beach, like a fucking six-figure salary, whatever, right?
mm.
But the
It's the
reality of it,
ex-influencer.
yeah, that's exactly what it is, unfortunately. But the reality of it is that you're going to spend most of your fucking time sitting in this chair with my cat here.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the reality of it.
Yeah.
But also you're like when people come into it, they straight away go to something. I've seen it like time and time again. Will straight away go into like something like a business coach rather than
Mm,
going further their education at someone like JPS, right? They'll
mm.
straight away go into like how can I attract clients rather than going how can I build my knowledge base, which will
Yeah, it's like, are you ready for clients? That's the thing.
yeah, but this will attract clients after a while. If you're fucking good, if you know your shit,
Yeah.
you're gonna get clients results, and then you're gonna get more clients. Whereas people just go
Mm.
bang money, and then
Spot on, man. So, so damn true.
yeah,
It's like people don't want to admit that they're super shit. Like I thought I was so good at the start. I was like, I've done podcasts with smart people, so I must know my shit. Bro,
yeah,
I had no clue. I was a terrible coach, frankly. I have one client who stayed with me the entire time when I first started until now, and like I don't know how he held on. Like, bro, I mean, like we all start somewhere, but nah, like everyone does start out being pretty terrible, and that's
yeah.
kind
Well,
of just how it is.
I think that's one of my favorite phrases is everyone looks like a cunt when they're doing something new.
Hmm, absolutely, but it's just those coaching skills. Like
Yeah,
they don't teach those the real coaching skills in certifications. Like
no.
I'm sure they teach some sort of communication skills, but what about like empathy? I doubt they're teaching like emotional intelligence and empathy. Like
Yeah, I
I
think that comes from the like working on a personal training floor, like a gym floor, right? Like the whole
mm,
how to speak to people and how to
mm,
kind of you see people from different backgrounds rather than online coaching nowadays. You can go on Instagram and go, right, okay, DM me for coaching plans in your bio, and then you're online coach. So
then
there's
you've
no
got
like,
X
yeah,
clients plus one. It's like just adds on to the number of clients I have. I
yeah,
really hate when someone comes up to me and they're like, "How many clients do you have?" I hate answering that question because it's like trying to judge your success as a coach when
yeah,
it's like my success as a coach is defined by how well I do with my clients and how my clients feel about me.
yeah.
Like,
I think that gets better with time with coaching as well. Like you get some people who like it's like the people who come on board with me now or like who even apply are like on that level where they don't like, does that make sense? Like you get like kind of the gen pop who want
mm,
just a bit of weight loss, and then all of a sudden you get like kind of bodybuilders who want to go X and X and X, and they're kind of like military operation. Yes, sir.
yeah,
Come back next check in.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. Some people are very mechanical, and I like it's an easy like when you get those people
Yeah.
and they're just like, cool, I just follow the steps. Cool, I got you.
Yeah.
That is like, oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
But sweet. I think we'll leave that podcast there. I think that's very very cool. I was actually kind of looking through the kind of topics and kind of asking you questions. I was like, this probably isn't going to be that kind of a long podcast. But I was like, oh, and then we kind of got into it. I was like, oh, okay. There's actually quite a lot to untangle here, which is
Yeah,
probably why you're
so
doing your
it's a
fucking
complex
thesis.
problem. Yeah, man. And then hopefully the PhD will make a step towards solving the problem. I hope,
Yeah,
but we'll see. I don't know what I'm doing for PhD yet, so
it'll
hands
be
off.
that. It's going to be that.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know where or what, but um, yeah, should be
Sweet.
fun.
Where can people find Mr. James Walsham?
People can probably find me. I have a website, but probably the best place to reach me is actually on Instagram. I spend too much time on Instagram watching Rainer Trainee's stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find me at the Hypertrophy Hub. So the Hypertrophy Hub, or James_Walsham. Walsham spelled like WALSHAM, M for mum, because I'm a mama's boy.
Yes, you are.
That's pretty much where you'd find me. You can also find me at AET in Auckland, but if you live in Auckland, yeah, come say hi. But most people probably don't.
Now people are going to fly out there to go see James. What about TikTok? Can people find you on TikTok?
I wish, man. Honestly, I wish. I'm slacking. I've been the last year, bro. My TikTok and Reels content.
You need to like point at stuff. So like you got some like it's like obesity,
personal trainer.
Sweet. We'll end the podcast here.